Hello, Black Sunrise fans. Our personal consultations are back. To book your consult, please visit blacksunrise.com. You can now schedule half an hour sessions and 1 hour sessions on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Tuesdays and Wednesdays 12 to 5:30 p.m. and Fridays 12 to 6 p.m. Please remember to spell Black Sunrise BlackSonrise. I look forward to hearing from you. Now, okay, so we left off part one about the erasure of women because of a curse put on the 6,000-year-old mother of women, Eve, the proverbial Eve. I mean, I don't necessarily buy all of this, but we're just talking about women's issues. Yeah. And how that curse put on Eve, and I believe it was unjust, led to the system of patriarchy that disconnected women from their mtDNA lineage, the lineage of great women. And this is what's causing, I don't believe that the fracture of women today started today. I believe it started with that illegal curse.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. So we're hashing this out, how the modern matrix sought to separate women from her feminine lineage, and also how that passed through the years of women feminine medicine being lost, because during that time when women were obfuscated, they were killed for feminine knowledge, how to maintain a woman's body by being called witches. Go ahead.
Right. And, going back to the Eve, the Garden of Eden thing, I mean, what is the message that they're telling us? That a woman is, her curiosity and her intelligence needs to be quashed, that there's something evil about the natural, curious, and intellectual curiosity of woman, right? And that's a powerful subliminal message, because what they're saying is, don't worry your little head about anything, we'll do your thinking for you. This is like a slavery in a sense. And like the knowledge, see, and these subjects are hard to talk about without getting into the esoteric side of that, which I don't think I necessarily need to do, because I could just go on and on about that. But the killing of women, European women in Europe who had the knowledge, who had woman lore, they had woman knowledge of how to heal, how to take care of us, and they were murdered to make room for this mineral-based medicine, this allopathic medicine that was coming through. And that has some really grisly, ghoulish roots. And it was started by these secret societies of very elite men. So it really makes me wonder what that was really all about, because it's just making people more and more ill.
Right. And also let's look at the translation they really started it in Europe, and I'm beginning to learn that they really were enslaving the Europeans before they decided to enslave everybody else.
Absolutely. They were even bringing Europeans as slaves to America, and they don't tell you that. So you look into some of Coromale's research and Dane Calloway, because they dig up original sources.
Right.
And they've been finding out amazing things on that.
Yeah. So when we look at the enslaving force that hate all humans, that's on this planet, when they exported the culture of death, the anti-feminine culture, they also did the same thing they did to the women who had the sacred feminine knowledge in Europe, which is exterminate them and burn them at the stake. They did it a different way to the Native American women and the African women. Unbeknownst to most, the gatekeepers of the oracles in African society, it was the men. However, the men were protected by the women because they said the women was literally the gateway between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. So
that makes sense.
protecting the shaman, the gatekeeper of the oral traditions, the gatekeepers of the mysteries, the gatekeepers of the secrets, was in fact women.
Wow.
And what subsequently happened when the non-humans left the ice and started, and I'm talking about the lizards, when they left the cold climates and went to Africa, one of the things they did was they wanted to get to those gatekeepers. And in order to get to those keepers, they had to get to the women because the women would see them coming. And what they did is the same thing they did in Europe, which was rape.
Yes.
Yeah, rape, dilute that bloodline. Okay. And weaken that bloodline. In Europe, it was called the prima noctus. Okay. The first night. In African America, they didn't have a name for the actual institution, but which is an institution of rape. And what they did is they removed that woman in order to get to the gatekeepers who kept the tradition, and then they began to exterminate them. So yes, you're absolutely right. They started doing that to the Europeans first, and for some reason, I think a lot of Europeans have amnesia. Or maybe they don't want to think about it, about them being colonized by these Dracos. I mean, but they started doing that to them first before they exported it to Black people and Native Americans, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a few that are aware of it. They're right about it. And though I think it's important that the people who are aware around the planet of how they've been colonized and tormented in this way need to come together. Like, now is the time. It's the same in Asia too. Because we don't hear a lot about how that plays out in Asia, but Runoko Rashidi, he made his scholarship on that, and he could really draw a lot. And the same within India, because the original people in India were colonized by the Persians. And usually most of the Indians that we really see in our face today, like in Bollywood and stuff, these are Persian Indians.
The Aryans, yes.
The Aryan, yeah, exactly. And even today that oppression is like unbelievable. But yeah, so it is, the myth is that it's a black and white issue. It's not a black and white issue. It's like a psychopathic energy devouring empathic energies of natural humans. So, and it's infected every continent.
It has.
It has. And like the divide and conquer, we all hear divide and conquer, and we know that this is how you conquer people, by dividing them. And we tend to think of it as, if you divide the masses, it's easy to conquer them. But we don't tend to think that the conquerors also divide themselves and pretend to be different groups that might be at war with each other, when actually all these evil creatures are working together to control the masses, because there really are more of us than there are of them. Okay? 1 to 2% of they can't control all these people unless they're working together. And so now people have to come together. It's time. We have to learn how to communicate with people that we're not used to communicating with. We have to find the common ground with people we think of as our natural enemies. We have to learn how to get over being jealous of other people or holding resentments, and realizing that we're all hurt. All of us are hurt creatures who are trying to make it, especially because they're rolling out like their genocide agenda, and nobody's safe.
Which proves that the non-humans at the top and the spiders they work for, they hate all humans. And for me, I just can't understand how people can't see they hate all humans.
It's the spell, like you said. It's like a curse, and it's a spell.
Absolutely. And yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And
Let's get to this. I want to draw something out. Let's
Okay.
elaborate on what you call, and let's get back to the female dynamic. What is this culture of contempt?
Okay. Yeah. The culture of contempt. It's all right. I'll tell you, for example, like um because I grew up in both, because I'm back and forth between my grandmother and my mother. My mother was like deep ghetto, really good, and my grandmother, we lived in a small town, um, and we were just working class thing, but it was a better school system and it was an easier way of life in the town I lived in with my grandmother. Um, and all the black people there had access to good education because all the schools in my town were really good schools back then. Whereas in New Haven, when I'd have to go to school in New Haven with my mother, they didn't even pretend to try to teach the kids in the hood anything there. So people, depending on where you grew up, you have like a very different idea of other people, and you tend to make up things about the other person. I also had access to private schools as well growing up, and that's like a whole nother thing too. So private school people, they don't know about middle class or poor hood schools, so they'll have their ideas in their head, and they'll make up their own stories about that. And people in the poor neighborhoods, they might. Well, I read a book recently from a girl who grew up in the hood of Chicago, and while she was defending being poor and hood and the ratchet trap culture that she embraces, she was also espousing a lot of contempt for other black people that didn't grow up that way, right? Without really understanding what she was saying, because she didn't know. So we tend to like look at people that are different from us and maybe feel like they're making a judgment about who we are and how we're living because they're not living that way.
And how
Or
does
they're
this
not.
affect a woman's womb? How does this affect? Because the real, men have their place, men have their society, men, for the most part, men have a connection to their Y DNA for the most part.
I can answer that.
How does this culture of contempt affect the woman in her role as being the guardian of the home, the guardian of the community, the guardian of the family? Because we're seeing the destruction right now. So how does this affect the culture of
Because it
contempt?
because it puts up a barrier that prevents us from connecting to each other and cooperating with each other. Because when women are not separated in this sort of way, we help each other. Like, here's a better way to do this. Or let me see how you do that, whether it's a craft or whether it's a household thing or whether it's a survival thing, whether it's a healing thing. And we can reach out and teach one another. Like, I just moved from one side of New York State to the other. And it's very different here. Like if we were living in an ideal situation, I should be able to go to any woman here and say, hey, what kind of herbs grow naturally here? What are the weeds or the foods that grow naturally here? Because part of woman law, I would know that in order to keep myself from having allergies or other things like that, I need to eat the food that grows here. Okay, that it'll
Yes, yes,
protect
yes.
me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
there's all sorts of ways in which this messes with women.
Okay, I see. That's a very good and thoughtful answer. Now, here's another point that you spoke about that spoke to me: the inability to be taught and or corrected. Now, this is very true. Now, if we're
Mm-hmm.
raising a society of conscious women, and it doesn't necessarily mean because she's a woman she has to have children. She doesn't have to
Right.
have children. She doesn't have to, desire to have a family. If she doesn't want to be married, that's fine. If she just wants a boyfriend, that's fine. If she wants to be
Mm-hmm.
married, that's fine. If she wants to have a children, that's fine. So how does this destruction of the vagina, how does this correlate to the inability to be taught and or corrected? How does one go about healing the vagina in order to repair the spirit?
Uh,
Perhaps let's get into the solutions.
yeah. All right. So getting to the solution, since I would have to defer with that particular question to two people who have made this an intense focus of their study, and therefore I feel it would be the best way for me to answer it. And the first is Queen Afua. She has a series of books that deal with this, and I would, if people haven't heard of her, I would highly encourage them to get her books on this very subject and start a reading group. Okay, and then her ex-husband, Reverend Dr. Philip Valentine, not the talk show host Phil Valentine, but the metaphysician, naturopathic Black community, Dr. Phil Valentine. He's written a really thick book called The Wounded Womb, right? And some people might think, well, he's a man. How would he know? Well, he was raised in Trinidad by his grandmother, who was a doula midwife. And he grew up literally watching women giving birth on the same table that they eat their dinner on, right? So he's written a book on this subject. So the best way to answer that question you just asked is to refer people to those two. Queen Afua, it's spelled AFUA, and Phil Valentine, The Wounded Womb.
Okay, well, let me ask you, what is your opinion of trying to deal with a culture of people who believe that they cannot be told anything, you can't tell me nothing, and they cannot be corrected because they know everything, even though you know they're going in a direction where their lives are being destroyed, but they're still unwilling to hear? How does one heal the womb in order to get to the mind, or get to the mind in order to heal the womb? Do you just let them fall off a cliff and then you're there for them?
No, and I've been struggling with this. This is a hard one for me. And the first time I came across this was maybe like in the 90s, and so my method for a long time has been avoidance, because I swear if I hear another woman refer to her child as you little MF, I'm gonna catch a case. Okay. And I understand her frustration where this comes from, but it is so corrosive. It is. It is. But I don't know how to bridge that gap, because I've always been the community geek and isolated, because I'm always walking around with books since I was little, and saying weird things, because I've always been a seer, and I say things that people don't understand why I'm saying them. So I've thought about this a lot in the last couple of years, because I realized I do need to try to address it. And trying to find a way to be non-judgmental and non-combative it's challenging. I'm in Aries, and I'm also on the autism spectrum, so subtlety is not in my wheelhouse. But I've been working on that. What I've come up with is to maybe start off by trying to express that this isn't coming from a place of judgment. It's coming from a place of, honoring who you are, and a desire to have relationship and connection with you and other women. So if we can make a safe space, or if you can even tell me a way in which I could maybe suggest some things to you that I see that maybe you don't see, that you can receive it, and then also offer up a reciprocal relationship. Like maybe you could call me out on some of my attitudes that you perceive that maybe I don't see, right? So,
I see. So
I think
so. Your perspective is, one, you have to get close to the person.
Yeah.
And then you have to build some sort of rapport, some sort of trust with the person. And then you use a vulnerability, meaning, you can correct me, and in return, I can correct you.
Right. And in some ways it's easier because we do have social media influences of all kinds today. So, we could DM somebody and say, hey, listen, I want to start this. But you're a woman, I'm a woman, we're catching the same sort of hell. We need to find a way where we can connect and are like a safe space where we can sort of like agree upon what our problems are, and then also a safe way for us to communicate how to overcome these things together.
Okay. I'll give you an idea. We got 10 minutes left, but one of the things that's been on my heart, and I want to do it for fun, I just have to find like a dance space, is I want to teach women how to whine. And it's been on my mind for like years. And I know
many... How to what?
Whine. You know the dance, whining?
I don't know.
Okay, there's a Caribbean dance. It's whining, and it's a very ancient dance. It's kind of a little bit of a fertility dance. It's kind of sexual, sensual kind of thing.
Like belly dancing, sort of.
A little bit. The whining today is a little bit on the crazy side. That's not what I'm going to teach them. But this has been on my heart for like over 5 years. I've been saying, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because one of the ways in which to get women to actually love themselves is to get them to free up down there.
Yes.
And to be able to move down there without being judged.
Right.
But do it in a very subtle, because we're in America and America is highly religious. They're either extra liberal or extremely religious, and both sides will condemn. But do it in a way that's it's subtle, it's sensual. And if they have a boyfriend, it'll be a great way to say, hey, you can use this with your boyfriend. If they have a husband, it's a great way to say, hey, listen, you want to learn this dance so you can go back and do it with your husband. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but to get them to move down there, to discharge some of the negative energies that get trapped down there, because that's where a lot of women's negative energies are trapped. And that's why people used to whine. That's why they used to shake their hips. That is why they used to do this thing called tremble. It was to discharge some of the negative energies that would be locked down there.
Yeah.
Okay. And to free it up. And anyway, so that's something that was on my mind. So what I wanted to tell you was look for an avenue that doesn't use words.
Okay.
Look for an avenue that doesn't use words, because words today are very difficult to get people to, to hand over trust. So if it's something like, if you like knitting, if you like reading, try reading, a reading club, a book club. If you like knitting, a knitting club, that if you like, doing hair, braiding, nail painting, art, whatever, that might be a good idea for you to, to get the people to come to you. Okay, so we have 8 minutes left. Let's get into some of the solutions, as to how we can deal with this. From my perspective, I believe that the planet was once ruled by very powerful women. In the African tradition, the rulers of the sea, when the planet was ruled by a great sea kingdom, the rulers were women, but those kingdoms sank. In a mighty battle. And then the whole order of the universe was changed. And then it brought in this very fierce patriarchy. And this fierce patriarchy went across the planet, stamping out all history of women. And I believe they altered women's genetics while this was done. And part of the genetic altering was that they would not remember their female ancestral lines. And as a result, here we are today. Women are crazy, they're violent, they're jealous, they're in contempt, they're vicious. We can't form communities. If they perceive someone is doing something better than them, they'll plot to destroy them. We can't form, all of these things. So this is what I'm thinking. We have 5 minutes. Tell me your solution. Go for it.
All right, my solution comes from my grandmother, at least for that genetic engineering, because I think that's still going on, and their whole Bible grimoire starts off by telling us that they were engaged in genetic engineering. They call the book Genesis, all right, and they tell us that women come from a man's rib. Well, we all know that women can't come from a man's rib unless some genetic engineering was involved, because people come from wombs, right? But they're still doing genetic experiments because they're altering the food that we eat. Okay, they're putting stuff in our water. They're putting stuff in the air. That's all changing our genetics. And now they're injecting things in people right into their bodies that's altering their genetics. So my grandmother, and it's funny, my daughter and I talk about this a lot, because when I was younger, I just thought it was religious, but I realized that my grandmother's the daughter of a medicine woman, and I realized she was teaching magic. And she used to say, don't eat anything unless you pray over it, because you don't know what this man did to this food. Okay, and if you pray over it in a certain sort of way, you can alter it back to what it's supposed to be and tell your body to receive it that way. Okay, and so I think that's something that we could and should do.
Which means that what you're trying to say is communicating with the cells in the body.
Yes.
And telling the cells to go back to
override, yeah.
And telling the cells to revert back to their original homeostasis. The state there.
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That is a great observation. And I think that's a very good solution. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, because no matter how, like, what we got going on, what condition or whatever else, if we're here, then we're made up of cells that knew how to create a perfect body. Okay, and they're being messed with, but if we set the intention and tell it, no, revert back to how you were, I believe we have the power to override what's been done. And I use myself as an anecdote, because at least 3 times I've been told that you're going to have to use this medication for the rest of your life, or you're going to be dead before your kid is in high school, or you're going to have to wear colostomy bag for the rest of your life. And I didn't agree with any of that, and I'm still here. Okay, so without medications, without any of these awful things that have been prescribed. And so, yeah, I think that talking to your body, letting it know what you want it to do, not agreeing with any doom, because that's a curse. You know, it's a curse. Words are used as curses. We go to grammar school. Grammar means the same as grimoire, and they're teaching us spelling. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, you know, and so we have to be very aware of that and override that. And if we didn't have the power to do that, they wouldn't spend so much effort trying to control how we think, hiding who we are from ourselves, and, you know, and all the other things they do to distract us from owning our own power.
Right. So what you're saying, in essence, the basis of what you're saying is will.
Yes.
The woman must communicate with the cells in her body her will.
Yes.
What she wants it to do. And you use the term agency, which is take control, use the power that you have in a way that you control the situation.
That's right.
Okay. That sounds like a very good solution. So we have 2 minutes left. Is there any way for people to connect with you on social media, get to know you better? Are you on the Discord channel, my Discord channel, where we discuss all sorts of things?
I'm not on Discord, but I am working on making a community online. I haven't put it up yet. But if anybody's interested in getting on, like, in my mailing list, I could give my email.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and it's Kady Mage. It's spelled KADYMAGE gmail.com. If people get in touch with me there, then I'll put them on a mailing list, so that when I do get stuff jumping off, they can reach me there. I also have a Instagram under Kady Mage, spelled the same way, that I haven't really set that off yet, but I will.
Okay. All right, that's wonderful. So we're at 30-second mark. Okay, guys, I thought this was a fascinating conversation about the destruction of the vagina and what we can do to repair it. I'm of the belief that this happened a very long time ago, whereas Kady believes it's a little bit more recent. But either way, if you know your vagina